Hey, welcome to the lesson. For this one, I wanted to approach it like we're just two friends hanging out in a room talking about guitar and talking about music. And the subject I wanted to dig into here is different ways to improvise over dominant chords. And the way I'm going to do this is kind of outline it and show four different sounds you can play around with. And then for each one of these sounds, I'm going to glue them together with a minor pentatonic scale. And hopefully you get something that you can play around with, experiment with, and eventually throw into your playing. So let's outline the four sounds. The first of which will be mixolydian, which is a lot of times kind of a default for playing over a seventh chord, a dominant chord. And what I mean by that is it's a major chord with a flat seven. So mixolydian will be the first sound we'll explore. Then we're going to look at a phrygian-dominant sound. So the special features with that will be it'll have a major third, just like a normal dominant chord or mixolydian. It'll have a flat seven, but it also has a flat two, and it has a flat six in it as well. So it's got a really exotic kind of sound. Then we'll look at lydian-dominant. It's going to have a flat seven, like all the other dominant chords. It'll have a major third, but this one will also have a raised fourth, which gives it just a little bit of a different flavor, which is really cool. And lastly, I'll show what I'm going to call a mixo-aeolian. And it's like a combination of mixolydian and the natural minor scale. So it has a major third. It has a flat seven like the others, but this one also has a minor six. So it's, again, a different sound. And what I want to do first is I'm going to put on this loop that I have set up. I'm going to improvise for a minute. And on screen, I'll put the name of the kind of sound I'm digging into at that time, just so you can start to hear it, and then I'll explain what I'm thinking and seeing so you can use it as well. So here we go. Now that we have a good sense of how these different approaches sound, let's look at each one in finer detail and see what we can do with them. So let's start over here toward the 5th fret. I want to share this approach that I always do with the guitar, and it's this threefold approach where everything I do, I try to see it and execute it in 3 different ways, or have the ability to execute it in 3 different ways. So I'm going to start with this arpeggio form, a really simple C, like that, and then I'm going to do the same thing right here. That started with the ring finger, and now I'm going to go with the index finger and go like this. That's just the major triad. Now let me do the same thing and throw in the flat 7 interval, and then you'll kind of get a sense of that as well. That's going to be kind of the home base for just about all of these different approaches. They all will have that kind of arpeggio form living inside of them, and then we're just going to tweak little things. For the mixolydian stuff, I would do exactly like I just outlined, sing a shape like that. Let's say I'm starting down here in the 5th fret position, but I'm also going to tie that into the minor pentatonic that I can see right there, which would be something like this. reason I'm using the ring finger and not the pinky here is because I like to do a bend a lot of times, like that, and having the ring finger ready is just a better approach for me. So take it or leave it. And then, so those two shapes together, if I play around with those, you'll get stuff like. So moving up here, we've got this diagonal form, and if we throw in the flat 7 and the 9th, that's already a really cool sound. You could just play around with that. And in fact, that could be a good way to go, is just get to know each element in each different approach in each different area. Moving on though, if we combine that with the minor pentatonic, it's this really incredible sound. And by the way, I also am going to include the major 6 right here, because that's part of that kind of mixolydian basket of sounds, you know, that works really well. So I'll have stuff like this. So just a really fun, kind of funky, dominant sound. Moving on, I mentioned that up here we could do this. That sort of thing. It creates this beautiful movement where we can start to slide up into a different position. And by the way, one of the benefits of this threefold approach, one of the biggest benefits, is that now instead of just seeing things in one area, we've kind of carved out this bigger slice of the fretboard. It's almost the entire thing in a sense, because things just start repeating once you get high enough up. And same thing down here. So we're covering a really wide range, and it really increases our mobility and fluidity when we're playing. So over here, now the minor pentatonic that I would be seeing in this same zone, if I start with my index on 10, it would be more like this. And really it's the blues scale, but I just include that all the time. So I'm more likely probably to actually go like this. Index, pinky, do middle finger here, and then slide up. And that way I can hit these bends here too. And like I've mentioned in many videos, a lot of times, almost all the time, that minor third has a little bend to it. So here's what that kind of set of sounds sounds like. Let's do the same process for the phrygian-dominant, and I'm going to move things along a little bit and explain that everything that we just did, or most of what we just did, we can just tweak one or two things and get this whole different sound. Now let's move down to the 5th fret, and I mentioned earlier that Phrygian has a flat 2. That's one of the special things about it. Phrygian also has a minor third, and since I'm also including the minor pentatonic, that note was coexisting in my head anyway, whether I'm thinking of it as Phrygian or thinking of it as the minor pentatonic, it already was there, so I'm already just including it. The other thing about this mode is we're going to have a minor 6, so it's going to have this kind of more serious tone to it. And let's kind of map out maybe the scale pattern you could play around with down here. So if I'm on the 5th fret, I might see something like this. Here it is a little slower. Do the same thing on the next string. Slide up with the pinky to 9. And then backwards. Here's what it'll sound like if we're just playing with that kind of scale pattern. So that one really has quite a different sound than the first example with just mixolydian. Let's do the same kind of stuff up here. Now moving to this kind of 10th fret zone. Over here, because of the shape that's happening, I'm just naturally going to see things a little differently. So here's more what I would be seeing in this area is we've got that kind of typical triad form, and then I just see this sort of thing. It's a really easy move to play. It's just pinky, middle, index, pinky, middle, index. Here's a little shortcut if you want to use this kind of sound over a chord that doesn't have C as the tonic, because these things obviously don't just apply to C chords. So if I come down here and let's say I'm playing a G, or whatever chord you're thinking of with this shape, whatever fret your index is on, start this kind of pattern where you go pinky, middle, index, pinky, middle, index. So, but we're up on C for our example, so it'd be more like. And again, it has that kind of exotic sound because of that flat 9, I think is really the key to it, and the minor third too. So here's what that sounds like. Now as we move up a little higher, we're going to be getting up into this kind of 10th fret to 13th fret range. And to reiterate this dominant chord that we were doing, it was more like this. So now, if we want to do that more scale kind of pattern, we would go like this. And here's what that would be like improvising in that area with those couple sets of sounds and the minor pentatonic or blues scale. So here we go. Very cool. Now, let's move on to the Lydian-dominant sound. It's going to have a lot of the same features with the dominant chord that we've been looking at, so we can keep that consistent. But now this one will have a raised fourth, and I'll show you what that'll look like. So if we're down here, back to the 5th fret, the raised fourth is going to be the easiest spot to probably play it based on what we were doing before, is this right here, the 7th fret of the B string. So let's take the arpeggio again for a dominant chord, and now let's just throw that note in. And that starts to give you a sense of how this is going to sound. And the cool thing here is you can either keep the 5th after the raised fourth, or you can leave it out. So here's what I mean. Either go like, or maybe you don't play the 5th, and you play the root. So lots of different ways you can mix and match the order of things. I'm also going to combine the dominant chord. I'm also going to combine the minor pentatonic like we were doing before. So when we move up here to this position by the 10th fret, I mentioned before that if you just go like that, you have this kind of more Lydian sound. If you include the flat 7, it's Lydian-dominant, which is really fun in and of itself. But here's this really fun weaving pattern I like to throw in. It goes like this, starting from the 10th fret of D. Let's see how it sounds if we use that kind of pattern as a template playing over the track. Now moving down. Let's go to the last position where we have the index finger on the 10th fret here, sliding up. And now our Lydian sound is going to be including this note here. So if we slide up, we've got that sort of thing. So, and then the minor pentatonic right here, or blues scale. And it'll sound like this. Okay, the last sound I wanted to share with you is this more kind of mixo-aeolian sound. So it's going to be just like mixolydian, but with a minor 6. Down here, we've got our arpeggio we've been looking at. So nice and easy there. For the scale pattern, if you want to play it, I find the scale pattern works more easily depending on where we are. So yeah, that's really similar to that phrygian-dominant sound. Let me play them side by side so you can hear them. Here's phrygian-dominant with a flat 2 and a minor 3rd, by the way. And here is the mixo-aeolian. So there is some similarity, but I would say the phrygian-dominant one has more tension inside of it. It's just a little more pointed sounding. Here we go. I'm going to mix the arpeggio for a dominant chord with the scale pattern we just looked at with the minor pentatonic. I'm going to juggle those three things, and let's see how it sounds. That was kind of a good segue up into this higher area, and the thing I like to play around with here, again, because of the shape, it inspires a different approach. So we've got our arpeggio that we've been looking at, or the 9th, and then all I'm going to do is include a flat 6 right there, or a minor 6, I should say, and that's going to be right here. So whatever chord you're trying to play this over, it's the same fret that your middle finger is on in this kind of diagonal form. So that can be like a little shortcut, just going. That'll help you get that sound across. Then I'm going to just mix in minor pentatonic as well. And here's how it'll sound. The last area we'll look at and the last sound we'll look at is doing the same thing, but with the index finger up here on the 10th fret and where we have more of a slide. If we want to mix in this mixo-aeolian sound and do more of a scale pattern, we could go like this. And if we combine that with the blues scale and with the arpeggio, we'll have a ton we can play around with like this. So there you have it. You've got 4 different sounds you can play around with. They all have something in common, yet something unique to offer. And if you want the guide sheet, I've got a link in the description. It's free, and that way you can kind of have some visuals and some different patterns you can play around with to inspire your own playing. Let me know if you have any questions about this, or if there's another topic you'd like to see a lesson on. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and hit the share button, and I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time.